country.
Well, I would tend
I think you should leave it, Jonathan. No government's been well disposed towards moles since Anthony Blunt.
Anthony yes, quite. Very good.
You know the one about Blunt, Burgess, Maclean and the Prime Minister of Poland?
No, certainly not at a funeral.
Stop you from becoming our MP.
Don't worry, we'll think of something.
Yes. And then it's onwards and upwards. Oh, the sky's the limit for a dynamic man like you. But what, it would be easier if you were married.
Quick! Come quick! Mr. Chapman's dead. He's been murdered.
So, Mr. Chapman, the ambitious politician, is dead. And the evidence points to these 6 murder suspects. So, there are the murder suspects, the 6 weapons, and don't forget the 6 rooms at the Grange. Our detectives are ready to interview the suspects, but first, to decide who begins, Edward and Bob, a test for your powers of observation. There was a buffet table there. How many knives on it?
2.
2, correct. So that's earned you the right to go first to cross-examine our suspects this evening. You have 3 questions followed by a deduction. Oh, and one final point before you start. 5 of these suspects will be telling the truth. Only the murderer can lie. Your first question, please, and to whom?
Mrs. White, do you always eavesdrop on your good lady when she has guests?
I like to keep an eye on what is going on in the house.
I think that's a very responsible attitude. Your second question.
Colonel Mustard, you were about to tell an interesting story about Blunt, Burgess, Maclean and the Polish Prime Minister.
Yes.
Mr. Chapman prevented you from telling us that story. I wonder if you'd be kind enough to tell us all.
I must say, I think humour is not really on the menu this evening.
I'm very sorry at this moment, I cannot recall it. But if you give me your address, I will send it to you.
Your third question, please, and then a deduction.
Professor Plum, how did you feel when you found you were going to be redundant?
I was very upset, but I think the charges that were leveled against me are going to go to court and they'll be answered by a different jury. And I have a very good barrister.
So from one court of a kind to another. Your deduction, please.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Mrs. White.
Why?
She may be a frail old lady, but there's just something at the back of her somehow, you know.
With what weapon?
I think she done it with the statue in the drawing room.
I wouldn't dream of ruining that statuette.
So you're saying it's Mrs. White with the statuette in the drawing room. I can tell you you're wrong on all 3 of those assumptions.
So we can tell someone.
The advantage passes to Joanna and Eileen. 3 questions, please.
Reverend Green, it seems your fanatical affection for moles, do you think that you would have liked Mr. Chapman to be the future MP?
Well, not particularly. I'm afraid I have subtle suspicions that he was rather like Mr. Taylor, or the predecessor. Neither showed great interest in ecology, and in fact, I mean, Save the Moles has been my pet thing for an awful long time now. You see, what we want to do in the moles...
The answer is no. The answer is no. Your second question, please.
Mrs. Peacock, what would it mean to you if Colonel Mustard was successful in becoming the parliamentary candidate?
I would have been... I will be delighted should he be the parliamentary candidate.
Is that as personal as it gets?
I feel that you are being more personal than we should get.
Miss Scarlett, what happened in the billiard room with Mr. Chapman?
Keep it brief, Miss Scarlett.
Well, actually, he took me there to blackmail me. He tried to persuade me to make Mike step down from politics. Otherwise, he would tell my stepmother about Mike and my love affair.
Your deduction, please.
Professor Plum, in the kitchen with a knife.
Professor Plum in the kitchen with a knife. You're right on one of those assumptions. So, for the moment,
The one,
two sets of
Miss
deduction.
David, is not me.
But before we go on, I want to put that same evidence to our grand jury here, the 300 members of our studio audience. Now, you've seen the clues, you've heard the suspects and the detectives. What's your verdict? This is your chance to put your finger on the brutal killer this evening. Please make your decision now. And there's your verdict on the evidence so far. 1 in 3 of you say that the culprit is Vivian Scarlett. But in fact, 47% of you, nearly half, point the finger most decidedly at Professor Plum.
What? A word, Mr. Bellini. A word in my own... Excuse me, 1 second. I may have had some shady dealings on the stock market, but I am not a murderer.
British justice will see to that, I'm sure.
I hope so.
But is that your view at home, I wonder? We'll take a short recess now, a few moments to collect your thoughts before we continue our investigation into exactly who murdered politician Mr. Chapman. Welcome back. Mr. Chapman has been murdered with, we now know, 5 possible weapons in one of 5 possible rooms at Arlington Grange. And now that Mrs. White's been eliminated from our inquiries, the certainty that one of these 5 remaining suspects is the murderer. Before I invite our detective to make a fresh deduction, some intriguing new evidence. Now we can take a look at the moment when Mr. Chapman and Miss Scarlett slipped off into the billiard room.
Don't do it, Pete. Won't achieve anything.
What about
Having a go, Mr. Chapman?
What makes you think I want to do that?
Well, and the look on your face. Like you've been staring so hard at him all day.
I think I'd better get some room. Thank you for your concern, Padre.
I don't know what to do, Mike. I really don't.
I told you I can't have you subjected to rumor and innuendo from my sect. It wouldn't be right. No buts. Come on. Back to work. We'll think of something.
Now, to decide who has the chance to apply this new evidence first, Joanna and Eileen, a test of your powers of observation. Reverend Green was listening there at the door. Which room was it?
At the billiards room?
Correct. You have the right to ask one question, now not to be one, and then make a deduction. So please, your question.
Colonel Mustard, who would you prefer if you became Member of Parliament to have as your wife, Miss Scarlett or Mrs. Peacock?
Oh, I think that's
It's a
my
terribly
business.
personal question.
A straightforward
I'm afraid you can't have an
question.
answer. It's my business. So obviously,
Shouldn't
I
be
will...
bilingual.
He has the right to make his choice of wife later. I think your deduction.
Right. Professor Plum, with
Why?
a black tie.
Why?
Having
And
to
leave Miss Scarlett.
and leave Miss Scarlett and his career in shreds.
Ed, what room?
In the study.
So you're saying it's Professor Plum with the black tie in the study. I can say you're right on 2 of those assumptions, but 2 only at the moment. Edward and Bob?
Professor Plum, what were you doing outside?
Well, as I'm sure many of you will appreciate, I drank too much. I needed a little fresh air.
Well, we still think it's Professor Plum, because he had too much to lose. I think the crook lock could be involved, because all the cars are outside. As for the location, the library.
So it's Professor Plum with the crook lock in the library. You are right on one of those assumptions. But